Welcome to this course on fluid mechanics, and we will continue our discussions on Reynolds transport theorem, energy equation, momentum equation, etc. And in the last class, we had talked about a particular technique to measure flow rates. In this technique, what we had seen was that if the flow is passing through some internal conduit, if you cause a change of area, then this change of area will imply that there will be a change in velocity. And this comes from the continuity equation, and this will mean that there is a change in pressure. So then, using Bernoulli equation and continuity equation, we can relate the change of pressure to the velocity, and hence we can find the flow rate. We had talked about three devices last time, and I have taken some videos from YouTube to illustrate these devices. We have already talked about them in the last class. This is a video from Eaves Equipment Corporation.
The differential flow meter is the most common device for measuring fluid flow through pipes. Flow rates and pressure differential of fluids such as gases, vapors, and liquids are explored using the orifice plate flow meter. The differential flow meter, whether Venturi tube, flow nozzle, or orifice plate style, is an inline instrument that is installed between two pipe flanges. The orifice plate of the flow...
So this was, you could see the design of the three devices here, and there's another nice video, so you can have a look at these videos separately after the class. There's another one again illustrating these three principles, which also visualizes the flow. And so this video, which is from Endres and Hauser, and the video is listed here, and you can later see these. We'll just play a bit of this.
The most diverse substances are transported and distributed in piping systems every single day. They can include solvents and chemicals, oil and gas, or steam for energy transmission. The fluids flowing through pipes often have completely different properties. Therefore, different principles for their measurement are required. One method is flow measurement, based on the differential pressure principle. Some 300 years ago, Swiss mathematician and physicist Daniel Bernoulli discovered the direct relationship between the pressure and speed of a fluid flowing in a pipe. Italian physicist Giovanni Battista Venturi also performed experiments on flow, and in 1797 he built the first flow meter for closed pipes, known as the Venturi tube. Here is how this measurement method works. Differential pressure flow meters have an artificial restriction integrated into the measuring tube, illustrated here by the example of an orifice plate. Two holes are located in the pipe wall, one before and one after the orifice plate. Two separate tubes connect these holes to a differential pressure sensor with its two pressure chambers separated by a diaphragm.
So this second video also illustrates the principle, and I would request you to see these videos. Basically, I have shown them for clarity of the figure's sake as to how these devices work. Now, let's introduce a concept of what we call average velocity at a cross section of flow. If we have flow in a pipe and we look at the cross-sectional area AA, and let's say this is the z direction and the velocity here is Vz. So this is 1D flow with velocity in the z direction as z. Then the flow rate, we use the symbol Q dot for flow rate at any section, and here we take a section AA which is perpendicular to the axis. So this we can say will be equal to, this is volumetric flow rate. If it is mass flow rate, you have to multiply it by density. This will be equal to integral Vz dA, where dA is an annular area. Okay, so this we can write it as integral Vz into 2 pi rdr, assuming that the flow is one dimensional, so it is not changing with the z direction. It could change with the radius, so that is the only direction in which the flow is changing. We'll also use the term axisymmetric when flow does not change with theta in circular problems. So this is the flow rate, and what we can say is the average velocity, we use the symbol V bar for average velocity. This will be equal to flow rate divided by the cross-sectional area A. So here it will be Q dot divided by pi r square, where r is equal to the radius of the pipe. Now this average velocity can be defined for any area, not necessarily cross-section of a pipe. It could be even across any sectional area A, and if the flow rate is equal to integral VdA, and if it is not uniform, then the average velocity will not be the same as the velocity at each point in the flow. But for uniform flow, V bar is equal to velocity at the section, because everywhere the velocity is the same. So in some sense, average velocity is a concept we use when flow is not uniform. If we use average velocity, we can apply the mass balance equation. Okay. Now we talked of the principle of measuring flow rates. Now, how do we measure velocity at a point in the flow? And for this, we have a device called a pitot tube. So first, let's consider a case of uniform flow in a pipe, and which will mean that velocity and pressure in the flow is only a function of the axial direction, not the radial or cross flow direction. So here, so that means we have flow in a pipe like this. This is the axial direction Z, and we have Vz, which is only a function of Z, and pressure is also only a function of Z. So here what one does is, In the flow, at the point where we want to measure the flow rate, we put in a small tube like this. We put in a small tube, and this tube, I'll show a video which will show a picture of this tube, or a page, web page, where you can see an actual figure of the tube. So this is a narrow tube which has a small end, and we have flow flowing like this, and this tube is inserted in the flow. So now this is a hole. What I have shown here, this is a hole, and this is a hollow tube. So now what we do is, at the place where this tube is measured, is kept just below this, we make a hole in the wall perpendicular to the flow. So a hole is made here, and from here a tapping is taken. And now what we do is, we connect these two together by a manometer. So basically, let's say this is the point A, this is point B. Point A is in the flow, and point B is on the wall. And so now what we assume here is and these two are connected by a manometer, which means we put in a different density fluid. Okay, so now what will the point at A, what pressure is measured at point A? So if this is the point A, if I draw a small control volume just in front of point A, and let me say this point is C, then what is the velocity of the fluid at point A? Clearly, at point A, we have the pitot tube and the flow is going inside. So there is no flow inside the pitot tube. So at this point A, velocity of the fluid at point A is equal to 0. So if we apply Bernoulli equation on a streamline between C and A, where C is just ahead or upstream. We use the word upstream when something is in the flow before a particular point of point A. So we get PC plus half rho VC square is equal to PA. So this is what Bernoulli's equation gives me. Okay, so now PA is what we call as the stagnation pressure. PC is the pressure at point C just before the flow. So this is PC is what we call as the static pressure of the flow just before A. And if we look at the wall, then the wall point B this senses only the static pressure at the location and so P, because here this is perpendicular to the flow, so it does not sense the flow. So PC is nearly equal to PB, and this we call as the static pressure. So what we have is that P stagnation is equal to P static plus half rho V square. We call this as the dynamic pressure, or the pressure which comes because there's a velocity. If you convert that into pressure units, you will get half rho V square in terms of dimension of pressure. And this is what we have. And the manometer differential, which is equal to rho of manometric fluid minus rho times GH, where H is the difference of the manometric fluid. This corresponds to nothing but the dynamic pressure. So we have these terms, and this is how we define dynamic pressure and static pressure. So basically, if we put in a pitot tube and we measure the pressure difference between the 2 points, we can directly correlate it to the dynamic pressure and hence to the velocity at that point. So therefore, using this, we can measure, this is what we have shown, we can measure velocity at point A. Using this, sorry about this, we measure V sub A. So now this is the principle of a pitot tube. This works when we have flow where velocity and pressure are not changing. So if this is R, if V and P are constant with R, then pitot tube works. But you could have a flow, if you have a flow where V and P change with R. So that means I have a flow like this. This is the R direction. Velocity is a function of R and pressure is also a function of R. So how do we measure V and P in a flow like this? So for this, we have another instrument called the pitot static tube. And before I draw the figure, which way I'll just like to refer you to this web page on NASA website, where the pitot static tube and pitot tube principles are explained, and so at least we'll have a good figure of this. So this is a figure of a pitot static tube. In a pitot static tube, what we have is, we insert a hollow tube where the wall now has a finite thickness, and so it is a double walled tube. There are two walls, there's an inner wall and there's the outer wall. And this tube is inserted in the flow. So now what is shown here is the left side, from here the flow goes in, the white part of the tube which is shown here, that is this part, which is, so we'll get back to this again. So the white part of the flow, that measures the total pressure. And in the tube, in this tube, there's a small hole on the side. So that side measures what is called, what we can see here as the yellow part. And there are holes all along the circumference. So the yellow part measures only the local pressure, the static pressure at the point. Whereas the white tube measures the stagnant pressure. So the difference when these two, the yellow part and the red part, are connected to two different manometers. The difference of these two will give us the dynamic pressure or the velocity head. And the yellow part of the tube by itself, if we take its reading, the absolute value of that will give us the static pressure at the point. So this again you can have a look at this web page, but let me now come back to let me draw this figure and try to explain the principle to you. So that means in a pitot static tube what we have is there's a tube with double walls. So the inner tube is this one, and here this is also another hollow tube outside, the outer tube. Now in the outer tube what happens is, just at this point there are holes along the circumference, and then this outer tube is also connected. So we have an inner tube and there is this outer tube, and these two, the inner tube and outer tubes, are connected to a manometer. So this inner tube will measure the stagnation pressure, and the outer tube hole, the flow goes like this. So this measures the static pressure. And the difference between these 2 points A and B, the axial distance between A and B is negligible. So point A will measure the stagnation pressure at this location, and the location is actually both A and B are being considered at the same location. B measures the static pressure at this location. So obviously there is a small error because A and B are not at the same location, but this is very small compared to the axial dimension of the flow. And the difference of these two will give us the dynamic pressure, and the A will give us the static pressure. So this is how we can measure pressure and stagnation pressure together at one location. And for a better figure, you can refer to the figure given. Couple of more terms before I move on to the next topic, and this is again some engineering term, efficiency. We are introducing many engineering terms. So if you recall, we have earlier introduced CD. This was the coefficient of discharge, and this was the flow rate measured by the venturi or the nozzle, or the flow passing through a venturi, nozzle or an orifice, the actual flow rate divided by the ideal flow rate. Ideal flow rate is the one we obtain from. So ideal flow rate has been obtained from Bernoulli equation. And the ratio of these two, which is less than 1, because the actual flow rate, what are the reasons for the losses? Well, the flow is not one-dimensional, viscosity effects are important, and flow bends and all these things. So therefore, we have this coefficient of discharge, and in an ideal flow, this would be 1, but for an actual device, this is not 1. Similar to this, we have this concept of efficiency. And we have two energy devices we have talked of. One is a pump and one is a turbine. So let's talk of efficiency of a pump and efficiency of a turbine. Now efficiency is always less than 1. Remember this. Now in a pump, there are two types of energy. One is energy provided to the pump. So this is the input energy which you are putting in the pump. And the second energy is the energy given to the fluid by the pump. So efficiency of a pump is defined as energy which the fluid transfers to the pump divided by the input energy. And when this efficiency is less than 1, it tells us that all the energy which we are inputting to the pump does not go in the fluid, and by this energy in the fluid is the one which we will get from Bernoulli's equation if we are assuming ideal flow. But obviously there are viscosity effects and which have not been accounted for. So therefore the total energy which has been put in the pump, all of that will not go as the energy transferred to the fluid. There will be some losses as heat, and there will be viscous losses which causes the heat. So therefore the pump efficiency, which is less than 1, is given by this. So you have to account for this. Now for a turbine, it's a reverse case. Ideally, from fluid, we generate energy. And this is the one we get when we use Bernoulli equation, because we are talking of ideal energy of the fluid. Let that be equal to E fluid. But the energy output of the turbine is equal to E output. Now clearly all the energy which the fluid is generating, all of them does not come to the turbine as the useful work. Some energy is lost. And in this case, the efficiency of a turbine is defined as E output divided by E fluid. And once again, we keep in mind energy has to be less than 1. So this is the equation we have this is the energy equation which we have. Now we will look at two special or advanced cases of Reynolds transport theorem. The first of these is Reynolds transport theorem as applied to a moving control volume. Now, so far the problems which we have seen, the control volume was fixed and stationary. Most of the problems we will still keep control volume as fixed, but what if the control volume is moving? For example, we looked at a problem, or either in the lecture or the tutorial, of water hitting a vane and leaving at an angle. and we want to find forces on the vane. So water jet hits a vane and turns by an angle, and we wanted to find force on the vane. In this problem, we'll use continuity equation to find if this is V1, V2. So this will give us V1A1 is equal to V2A2. We use Bernoulli's equation, and this gives us that if height is negligible, V1 is nearly equal to V2, and then we use the momentum equation to find the forces. Now what if this vane is mounted and is moving with a velocity V vane? If the vane is moving, then how do we solve the problem? The easiest way we do is we take a control volume which is fixed to the vane. So if I take a control volume, which I am showing now by a dotted line, which is fixed to the vane. So now if the jet has an absolute velocity V1, the velocity of the fluid as seen by the control volume, this will be equal to V1 minus V vane. Now the advantage of choosing the control volume fixed to the vane is that the flow in this frame is steady, because we just see the vane, we see the flow coming in with the velocity V1 minus V vane, and therefore the flow will be steady. If control volume is fixed on the ground, then let's say if this is the vane, let me just draw, if this is the vane, and if I choose a control volume which is like this, let's say if I want to include the vane for all time in the control volume, I want to keep it for a longer time. So then what I'm going to do is, if the control volume is fixed on the ground, I choose let's say a biggish control volume which contains the vane, and at time t is equal to 0, this vane hits here, the velocity of the jet is V1, the vane moves with V vane. This is the control volume at time t1. At a later time t2, this same control volume will look like this, and now this control volume, here the amount of water in the fixed control volume will increase, and clearly flow with respect to fixed control volume is unsteady. So that is why I choose a control volume which is fixed to the vane. So in this control volume, I see V inlet as seen by the moving control volume. This is equal to V1 minus V vane. And now when I apply Bernoulli equation in this steady flow, which is the moving control volume, the velocity at the exit is also equal to V1 minus V vane at an angle. So then I can solve the problem. Now the question which I pose is, does the momentum equation hold for all values of V vane? Now we realize in the momentum equation we have used Newton's second law. And Newton's second law is valid only if momentum is measured with respect to inertial frame of reference. So if V vane of t is constant, then the frame of reference stays inertial and we can apply Newton's second law. And in this case what we will get is sum of external forces is equal to d by dt of integral v rho dv plus integral over the control surface v rho v dot n dA. In this case v above is measured relative to the control volume as reference frame is fixed on the control volume. So therefore the first term d by dt integral v rho dv is equal to 0 if v vane is constant, because things are not changing with respect to the control volume. In fact, even if V vane is not constant, this term will again d by dt of V rho dv will still be 0 because of steady state. But the second term which we have, integral over the control surface v rho v dot n dA, again for both cases, steady and unsteady, this will be equal to integral on the surface 1 v relative to the control volume at 1 m dot 1. So this we will assume this is at 1 plus v relative to control volume 2 times m dot 2, and m dot 1 is equal to m dot 2 is equal to flow rate relative to control volume. But if V vane is not constant, then we cannot say dp by dt as measured from the, now this xyz is the moving frame fixed to the control volume. This is not equal to F external. So how do we work out problems like this? And to work out problems like this, that means problems where control volume is fixed to an accelerating frame of reference. And I will take you back to the basic mechanics course, where we'll go back. What we said was, let capital XYZ be the frame fixed to coordinate, or let capital XYZ be, sorry, I'll just reframe this. Let capital XYZ be coordinate axis. So I'll just get my, we'll erase this. Let this be the coordinate axis fixed to inertial frame. That means a fixed frame. And let small xyz be coordinate axis fixed to moving, which is an accelerating. In general, we will take it as a rotating frame. So then, if you recall, if this is capital X, Y, Z, and if this is a moving frame, small x, y, z, which could have, this is the origin A of the moving frame, point O is the origin of the fixed axis, capital X, Y, Z. A is the origin of the moving axis, small x, y, z, and there is a point P whose velocity and acceleration are being measured with respect to fixed and moving frame both. The quantities when we measure with respect to fixed frame, I will use a subscript capital XYZ, and to the moving frame I will use small xyz. So then if you recall, acceleration of point P as we observe from the fixed frame, this is equal to acceleration of point P as measured with respect to the moving frame, plus we had 4 terms. Do you recall from the first course in mechanics? The first term is acceleration of the origin of the moving frame. Which are the other terms? The second term is omega cross r. Now what is r? R is the position vector. So r here I'll write is the position vector in the moving frame. So this is the vector AP. A to P, this is R. This is capital RA is the position vector of point A, whose second derivative we have taken as acceleration of A. So here the second term is omega cross R. This is what we called as the centrifugal term. Then we have the third term, omega dot cross r. Now omega is the angular velocity of the moving frame, and omega dot is the angular acceleration of the moving frame. And both of these obviously have been measured with respect to the fixed frame. So now this term we can call it as the tangential acceleration. So notice now there are four terms we have already written. The acceleration of point P as seen from the moving frame. And then I am clubbing four terms in a curly bracket. The first is acceleration of the origin, a centrifugal term, a tangential acceleration, and the fourth term, which is actually the fifth term on the right hand side. If you recall, this was the term 2 omega cross Vp, velocity of point P as seen from the moving frame. And this term, if you recall, this was called the Coriolis component of the acceleration. So this is how we can write the expression. So now when we look at the Reynolds transport theorem, let's now look at Reynolds transport theorem for a moving, and actually this moving means it's accelerating control volume. Then what we have is the Reynolds transport theorem says for this accelerating control volume, the dp by dt for the moving control volume. Now see, the P is the quantity where the change comes, at the momentum. So here the frame of reference is important. So for the moving control volume is equal to d by dt of v rho dv plus integral v rho v dot n dA. And these v's on the right hand side are measured with respect to the control volume. Now, this dp by dt as seen from the moving control volume, this will be equal to acceleration of point P as seen from the moving control volume times rho dv. So this is equal to how the moving control volume, this is the rate of change of particles with respect to the moving control volume. And this is equal to this term d by dt of volume integral rho dv plus surface integral v times rho v dot n dA. So this is Reynolds transport theorem, and we can use it with respect to the moving control volume. Now what we do is, this term acceleration of P, I call this equation 1. Now I take the four terms of equation 1 on the left hand side. So I take equation 1 and I take the four terms on left hand side and we integrate over the entire control volume. So what we get is the first term. So this I can using this. So let's now use mechanics for this. So we have triple integral AP with respect to x, y, z rho dv. This will be equal to mass times, now let's look at it, acceleration of P. So this will be, I'm just looking at this term. This is first I'm looking at AP with respect to capital XYZ. So this becomes equal to triple integral of AP with respect to capital XYZ rho dv. This is nothing but a total acceleration of each of these terms as seen from the so this is the, let's go back, this is this term here, and I take these 4 terms in the curly brackets on the left hand side. So when I take these 4 terms in the left hand side, what I will get is minus, now because I have changed sides, integral of the first term becomes AA. The second term was omega cross r. The third term was omega dot cross r plus 2 omega cross Vp with respect to small xyz. All of this, and then I have rho dv, that is I integrate over entire this thing, and this minus sign I will take here, and this becomes the total integral AP rho dv. So that means on this left hand side I will get one term minus these 4 terms. Okay, now the first of these terms, what is triple integral AP capital XYZ rho dv? This is nothing but integral of acceleration of point P with respect to fixed frame times dm, and this is nothing but equal to mass times acceleration of center of mass as seen from fixed frame, and this by Newton's law is nothing but F external on the control volume. So the first of these terms which I have used here, this term becomes m times acceleration on the center of mass of the control volume. Okay, now the second of these is AA times rho dv. So this is the first term. So this is now this integral AA rho dv will just become mass of the control volume times acceleration of the origin. Omega cross r rho dv. Now recall, omega is just the same for the entire frame. It does not depend on rho dv because that's all a part of the control volume. So this term becomes omega cross m times rc. Integral r dv is just r of center of mass, assuming the density is constant. So this will become omega cross times cross m times rc. Similarly, the third term, omega dot cross r rho dv, this will become omega dot cross m times rc, where rc is the position vector of the center of mass. Okay, and as observed from the moving origin. Okay, and then we have the third term, volume integral of 2 omega cross Vp with respect to xyz rho dv. Now this is velocity of point P as observed from the moving frame. So if the velocity is fixed in the moving frame, this will be 0. This is the relative velocity of the fluid with respect to the control volume. So this term omega can go outside the bracket. This will become 2 omega crossed with integral of Vp with respect to small xyz rho dv. If Vp, if this velocity, if this relative velocity is the same, if Vp with respect to small xyz is same at all elements on the control volume, then we can take it as 2 omega cross V with respect to small xyz times m. But normally when this term is not 0, then this will vary across the elements and it will not be amenable to be pulled out. And so what we get is, for a non-inertial control volume, so a control volume which is accelerating either linearly or a rotating control volume, what we get is F external acting on the control volume minus m times, there are these 4 terms, this will be equal to d by dt of volume integral V rho dV plus integral over the controlled surface V times rho V dot n dA, where once again on right hand side V is relative to the control volume. So this is how then we can solve these problems. And such a formulation is useful when we analyze an accelerating rocket. In a rocket, the acceleration is developed by releasing exit gases with a large momentum. So as the gases leave, they exert an upthrust on the rocket, and this is what causes the acceleration. So such a problem of an accelerating rocket, one needs to, or if one wants to work on this, we can use the control volume formulation. Now, there is one last topic on this which one would like to just touch upon before we finish and call off the discussions on this, and that is the second one, which I will just briefly touch, and we can have a look at this later either as self-study, and this is moment of momentum equation for a control volume. And this is normally used when we talk of turbo machinery. And in this equation, what we do is we take beta as R cross V. So therefore, B becomes equal to the volume integral of R cross V rho dV. Now in this case, R is measured from some origin O, and the quantity integral of R cross V rho dV is nothing but what we have defined as angular momentum of this entire control volume about point O. Now, so if I apply Reynolds transport theorem to with beta is equal to R cross V, which is nothing but the angular, not angular, angular in some sense, it's angular momentum per unit mass. I should call it angular velocity. Then what we get is the material rate of change of HO, dHO by dt is equal to d by dt of volume integral of R cross V rho dV plus integral on the control surface R cross V rho V dot n dA. So this is just applying the Reynolds transport theorem, and once again I'll make it very clear, Reynolds transport theorem does not impose any condition. It just tells me that how this quantity, the material rate of change of quantity, it relates to the rate of change of quantities in a control volume. But now if we apply Euler's second axiom, then what Euler's second axiom says is dHO by dt is equal to moment of all forces or all external forces about point O. And this will also include couples if they are there. Well, couples we are assuming they are formed by opposite forces, so they could also come in moments of forces, or we can take them as separately as couples. And this is valid if O is a point fixed in inertial space. So if O is a point which is fixed in space, then we have this equation, and the velocity V on the right hand side is measured relative to the control volume. So for this, now the point O has to be a point fixed in space. In mechanics, we have seen that Euler's axiom says O has to be a fixed point, but we also saw that we can apply this equation about the center of mass of the system. So if O is the center of mass, or a point accelerating towards or away from CM, then also we can apply. Now in a moving scenario, the third point will be varying, so it's not very easy to use, but either if the point is fixed or if it is a center of mass, we can use this equation. Now, generally when we use the momentum equation, then if we take r, theta, z components, then we can also apply it component wise. Now in rotational problems, typically velocity will be equal to a function of there's only a azimuthal component of velocity, or only a rotational or azimuthal velocity. There could be radial also, but if we are talking of v is equal to u, v theta, u theta case like that, and r, the position vector, is r er, and if angular velocity omega is equal to, omega is in the third direction, omega k, then if we look at r cross v, this will become r er crossed with u theta e theta, because the position vector in a two-dimensional case, maybe there's a z component also, so then you can add z ez, but so, and if we have this, So R cross V in this case will become R u theta Ez or R u theta in the k direction. And then the total moment about point O in the z direction will become equal to the volume integral of R u theta rho dv. Sorry, there's a d by dt term here. I think I may have missed, though I've kept it up there. I was missing it here. So d by dt of this term plus integral over the control surface R u theta times rho v dot n dA. Now, before I end, I know I've gone on for a bit long, but before I end, let's just look at this. When we have steady flow and a fixed control volume, then d by dt term will be 0. And if the flow is uniform at inlet and outlet, then rho v dot n dA, this becomes m dot at inlet or outlet. And if there is one inlet which we call as 1 and one outlet which we call as 2, then we also know m dot 1 is equal to m2 dot, and we can call it as m dot. And so then this integral over the control surface, wherever we get it, whether it is the energy equation or it is the momentum equation or it is the moment of momentum equation, in all these equations, this integral of rho v dot n dA, the term which we have made. So if there is one inlet, one outlet, integral of any quantity rho v dot n dA for one dimensional case and one inlet, one outlet, this will just become m dot, and whatever is this quantity calculated at the inlet we'll put a minus sign. Inlet by itself can have a sign, and plus whatever is this quantity at the outlet times m dot, and this can also have a sign for the inlet and outlet, and these will be typically either R times V or V depending on what is beta, or it could be energy if it is the energy equation. So this is how we then work on this. With this I end this lecture. Thank you very much.